I'll call the October 11th Town of Northwood Planning Board meeting, 2018 Town of Northwood Planning Board meeting to order at 6:35. Present.
Top writer.
Yeah, I know. You're usually sitting over there, though.
Yeah, I know. I moved. I want to be close to that.
I was just about to open with selectmen's rep, and I'm like, nope. Sorry, Hal Kreider, select persons are up. Boudreau, Betty Smith, Vice Chair Lee Baldwin, Chair Bob Strobel, Susan Austin, Linda Smith, James Purdy, town staff.
His notes.
Okay, thank you. We have minutes of last week, or last 2 weeks, September 27th to go over.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. B. Smith, second by Ms. Baldwin. Discussion, just, I don't recall if we actually did a decision on or recorded any comments on the preliminary conceptual consultation, but I think we didn't have any problems. Should we state that?
I thought it was fine just as it was written.
Yeah.
I think getting too far into there should be no problems with this might be getting close to prejudging something before an application comes in, so I'd leave it just at the discussion.
Good enough. That's why I asked.
Page 4, line 3. Change could to would.
Well, yeah, I mean typos I don't want to bother with
Okay.
too much.
If you see them, let me know.
Well, I'll see them, but I can just hand them to you as they're circled.
Oh, see? Okay.
Yeah.
Just to save time during a meeting.
Otherwise,
Just saves, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on page 6, close but not on line 13, it's Old Turnpike Road.
Oops. Oops.
Just to be clear, I would have to recuse myself. I don't want to do that unless I have to. Anything else of significance?
No.
Exorcist, I didn't catch that.
Thanks, in case we see it. Screen. Okay. So we have a continued case, 1815. Wanna come join us at the table?
You should be getting an updated copy of my staff report that was revised based on a draft that the applicant sent me
Yeah, that's fine.
earlier this week. There are no changes under the structure setbacks item. The changes are under number 3, the steep slopes, and number 4, the driveway location.
The extra card.
I get to share.
Thank you.
Both ways.
Yeah, really.
Nothing. Makes it easier to read. So.
Let's try.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Joe Wickert, and here tonight with Mark Minicelli. Like I said, a continuation from last month. James has given me his notes, and we'll just kind of go through.
Yes.
Oh,
Leave the table,
All right.
just like last time.
Yep.
So we were here last month, and the Minicelli's own Lot 5 on tax map 123. They have the residence there. It's 266 Harmony Road, and it's a large parcel. It's approximately 53.8 acres. And the intent is to create 3 road front lots on Harmony Road, leaving remaining parcel with the existing house of 47 acres. So we did ask for waivers on a lot of the detail for the back. So the plans we handed out are a 3-sheet set. On the first sheet is the detail showing the 3 new lots being created. The second sheet's more of an overview showing the remainder parcel. And the third sheet, which is the new sheet from the last submission, has the driveway line of sight plans. So when we were here last time, the 2 main concerns that we took away were Lot 5-2, the size of the building envelope and was it viable, and then driveways on 5-3. So what we have done to accommodate those concerns were we increased the frontage of Lot 5-2 by about 13 feet. So we held the easterly line, we shifted the westerly line about 13 feet forward, to the left or west. And that increased the size of that lot a little, but more importantly, at the front of the lot, which is where you would build without needing a special exception or some kind of zoning relief, it increases the size of that envelope. What we had to do, because Lot 5-1 was sort of a minimum frontage before, we shifted that lot over about, I think it's 10 feet. So we're a little closer to the existing driveway, but that has a pretty good flare to it. We still have over, I think it's 320-ish feet of frontage remaining on the remainder parcel, so it's a complying lot. I think the building envelopes got better. So I do have, I got an exhibit, sort of a revised exhibit from what we did last month showing the houses. We'll hand that out for you.
Mr. Chairman, while he's doing that, would you note for the record the voting designation and that a member has
Sure.
recused herself as an abutter?
Good point. Voting designation is Kreider, Boudreaux, Baldwin, Strobel.
Thank
Ms. Smith, B. Smith has recused herself.
Because wasn't it like 26 by 26 or something? It was very...
So,
For yourself.
when we were here last
L shape,
time,
I think.
we haven't changed the house layout on 5-3. That's all the same. I think it all works. It's viable. What we did, since we reconfigured the frontage of 5-2, what we did was previously we had like an L-shaped house and a front-load garage. So what we did was because we've increased that building envelope, we put in a 26 by 36 house, conventional shaped. We put a possible leach field area on there, and we've got a driveway. That's the driveway where we cut the line of sight profile. So I think it certainly increased the usable area. The revision to the lot line increased the usable area for 5-2, so hopefully we've addressed that comment. So in regards to the driveway, so if you turn to the third sheet in the plan set, we've got the driveway, we cut line of sight profiles. So the unique thing about your ordinance is you specify the distance you need to look at whatever the speed limit is. So if I think it's 30 and under is 250, and then 30 and up was 300, I think. But there's not a lot of specificity about to the standards you're supposed to use to determine it. So I think lot 5-1 and 5-2 are fine. We used a 3.75 foot eye height, a 3.75 foot target height, and we used an 18-inch all-season safe site distance, which I think that's a standard. I think that's ASHTO. So on lot 5-3, we use the exact same thing, but if you look where it says line of sight profile for lot 5-3, and you get to, it's right around station 1 plus 25 right, there's the existing ground projects about, I think it's 4 inches into the all-season safe site distance. So you'd have a 14-inch all-season safe site distance versus 18. The issue is I don't know what the spec is. I don't know if it's 12 or 18. So there is an all-season safe site distance there. We've tried to illustrate what it is. On 5-3, we had talked at the last hearing about putting a driveway on the upper level because that's where the house would go. And by putting the driveway there, we would eliminate the need to go to the zoning board of adjustment for a special exception. That driveway line of site profile is going to take a little bit more configuring. Without knowing the spec, I just figured it wasn't really productive to go through a whole bunch of stuff. So somebody could say, well, no, we wanted 18, we wanted 24. So the basic problem with the upper driveway, and I don't think it's insurmountable, is if you look at the last, the 17 by 22 sheet that we handed out, we have a possible alternate driveway location listed. So right as you come off the road, there's about a 4-foot bank that comes off the road. So you come off the road and more or less right off a couple feet after the pavement, the road jumps up. So typically when we were doing it, we didn't see, and we looked, I didn't see necessarily a published driveway standard. You know, we used a -2 for like 10%, and then we tried cutting the profile. So when you do that, when you look coming out of the driveway looking left, somewhere around like 50 feet, which would be almost just to the west of the neighbor's driveway, and you can see the curb cut for the neighbor shown on there. We're bumping into the ground a little bit. So, you know, there's a bunch of different ways we could do it. We could, instead of coming down at a -2, we could come up at a +2. If the road agent said, listen, it's a small road, you can come up at a +3, then all those items are going to impact what we do. And so because Mark and Michelle aren't necessarily looking to build the houses, we would prefer that that be a function of building permit rather than a function of subdivision permit. So that's I think that's how we address the driveway line of sight issue. When we were here, there were some kind of parting considerations to come back with. So one of them was we can't try not to have the 4,000 square foot leach field, the suitable leaching areas in the setback. So if you look at the revised plans, we've moved all the 4Ks out of the setbacks. So that was done. And then there was discussion about showing, we had asked for waivers on full boundary survey on the remainder parcel, topography, wetlands, and the detail. So when we're here, there was discussion about, to be consistent, to try to show some topography on the back. We did. We kind of struggled with it a little bit more than I would have liked. We tried getting some LiDAR data, and just the way it is, it was kind of difficult to compile. James had sent us a file with the topography, and the only thing I don't think we fully addressed was the breaking out the slopes. So we did get a file with the slopes, but we're trying to compile them, but there's like, when you bring them in, they don't line up. So I think there's some kind of scaling factor that we haven't quite mastered yet in regards to what we need to do to make that work.
Well, on that note, so my apologies to the applicant. I think I sent the slopes file at, was it sometime today, or was it like the end of the day yesterday? And then I had meetings today, so I wasn't the best at responding to emails. The slope layer that we have at SRPC is from the New Hampshire Geological Survey, which predates the most recent LiDAR data that we got from the state. And that LiDAR data is what the contours are coming from. So I did my best to help the applicant and get them the best information that we have. that slopes layer is not going to match that contour layer perfectly. It's just not going to happen.
So there's two ways we could do it. Our preference would be that, you know, we've shown the back topo, we did ask for the waiver, and if that's acceptable to the board, that would be our preference. If that isn't acceptable to the board, then we can kind of go back and we can jury rig it and you know, take these contours and come up with slope ranges on it. So we can do it, it's just a little bit more involved. So whatever it is that the board wants, I think we can do either or. So I think
Excuse me.
the way,
Go ahead.
I think the way we were looking at it was, I think we tried to address the board's concerns that we heard from last month. So having said that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. If you have one, go ahead.
Not a question. I wanted to just comment on what he said about the overlay. I asked for the contours just so that we're not surprised by anything. And so I think this does a suitable job from my perspective. I don't think we need to have the overlay of what are the 20% versus 50. I don't think that really adds anything. What I was concerned about with not seeing the whole plot and contours is there something butting up or coming up close to some of these others that might be detrimental? And I mean, the contours pretty much lay out that there isn't, but this gives us the visual proof of that.
Good.
So, as the person that asked for it originally, I'm happy with it the way it is.
And I think as long as somewhere there's a note,
Oh, to depict which is the basis for it.
yes, as I think it looks like it's in note 12 on the overall sheet, sheet 2, 3, that essentially is a disclaimer saying you haven't surveyed it.
And I think the only,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
we
that-
probably we should beef up looking at it now on our, and I think we should beef up note 12 just to be clear that the contours are from the LiDAR data and not field work. So we'll beef that up.
Good.
I think offhand that's in a case like this where most of the development is taking place and we just want as
Yeah, that's why we didn't spend a ton of
Exactly.
time trying to make the
Right.
ranges work. So we figured it'd be good.
and that disclaimer obviously covers for the remainder of lot 5
Yep.
Yeah.
without problem, so. Okay.
I have one related question. Well, there's some big circles here. What do they connotate?
Oh, those are just the survey monuments, because we plotted them at a different scale to make them larger, they just look bigger. But if you look at the other plan, it shows on the other ones, it's just where we found an iron pin and things like
Okay.
that.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
Bob, do we have to specify which driveway we would prefer, or can we let them have two? Or how does that work?
Well, that's a good segue.
Oh, sorry.
I think they will not get two town of Northwood driveway permits.
Correct.
I think noting one as a possible alternative indicates that they are not asking for two, they are asking for one of the two. And really, the purpose of subdivision approval is to make sure that the lot is buildable and that there aren't going to be major problems that arise. I think I've heard of other communities that just ask applicants to show every location where safe site distance could be met, rather than you have to pick a specific location. So I don't have any concerns with having an alternate driveway, particularly if we're indicating that the information that we've received is sufficient for subdivision purposes, and we would rely on the road agent's technical expertise to determine whether there needs to be any minor grading, or a driveway needs to be built up, or a different driveway location would be better.
Does that somewhat answer your question? Answer your question?
Well, I guess, let me just ask, it seems to me like, I guess if this is the driveway you're thinking about using for this house location, that makes sense, and if you're thinking that people want to put the house in the back, then that would be,
Oh, sure, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, we don't have to specify that, or
No,
we'll just specify a driveway.
no. Because if they're on 5-3, I think,
This is 5-1.
yeah. The rightmost on
The one to the
plan.
right's 5-3.
Pardon?
5-3 is all the
This
way
is
to the right, yeah.
5-3. Thank you.
To cross the steep slopes would require ZBA approval with the driveway.
I think that when I saw the drawing last time, it didn't go over the steep slopes, it just
That's what I'm saying.
skirted them and
I
went to the
think-
back.
It previously nicked it a little bit, but there was room to turn it and get around it.
And I think what we did was, so when we did the driveways the last time, we didn't actually cut line of sight profile plans. So we went out in the field, we looked, gave it the little crouch down, look left, look right. Yeah, I think we can make it. Mark had met with the road agent. Road agent kind of looked at it, said, yeah, we think it works. When we put it on paper, I think you could make it work if we knew a little bit more about target heights and what the minimum and maximums were. We could certainly, then we could say definitively, yep, it works using this standard, or it doesn't work using this standard. And even, I think you get to a point where, like, if we're using ASHTO or DOT, DOT is certainly, the speed limits are higher most times. And one of their main concerns is we're not dumping water into their system, because most times they have a closed system. So this is more of a rural road. There's a part of me that says most of the road agents we deal with, a lot of them might look at it and say, well, if you had a 20-foot section of a 3% grade coming off of it, it's going to dump a little water on the road, but it's probably not going to be insurmountable, and it's not going to overwhelm any system or have a washout. So I think a lot of it is sort of a building permit function, and then you could adjust it, because, if it turns out that that's the problem, well, maybe you lower the height of the house, and you take some fill off to kind of see if we can make the lines work better, so.
So in this case, we don't really know where the house is going to be, so
No.
how do we handle that? I mean, just
Right.
leave it open?
Well, they've identified, my reading of the regs, subdivision regs, is you have to show 4,000 square foot in the driveway. Don't have to show the house, but in a case like this, because of the specific topography, you did a.
We're trying to be proactive and get in front of it.
Thank you, that's a
Yeah.
good word for putting it, very proactive to say, this is where we think it's gonna work.
Okay, got it.
Because it is not required by the regs, they don't have to show it and they're not bound by that, to my understanding of that.
There is
Or
a-
the site, the location of the houses on the drawings are illustrative only, not.
Correct. They will not be held to that, to the extent that we might keep one of these in the file just to show that it was submitted, but I think whatever ends up in the file, we should write on it, not binding.
Right.
So there's no confusion. We've indicated repeatedly on the record that that's the case, so that shouldn't be an issue in the future.
But I think James has brought up the idea of the alternate for 5.3 that, you know, this driveway, you're picking one and you're going to develop, you know, if you pick the left-hand side, you're going to develop in the back of the lot because you can't cross the steep slopes.
Right.
And if you pick the right-hand one, you're going to develop on top of the steep slope. Or like,
On top, yeah.
yeah, on top, as opposed to the back. And that'll be obvious from the building inspector or the road agent, whenever the permit goes. And I don't have any, I don't think that, well, you discussed it already. That would be on the permit side.
Yeah, I think
And we just have to make
I completely agree that the fact that there isn't sort of a default standard is kind of an issue. I think that's something that once we have a new road agent in place, it would be good for us to sit down and talk to them about what standard they assume should be applied. And whether that's we loop them in earlier in the process so that we know that a driveway permit is going to be issued, or we indicate a standard, or some combination of those things. I think for this case, my expectation is that the applicant present us with something that's defensible. I think with the site profile they've got that is at a 3.5 or 3.7 foot height, they're off by inches. So if a road agent wanted to see minor grading there, I would think that would be something that would be small, but alternatively, I've heard of communities using a 4-foot height profile, and if you were raising that height up by that couple inches, then you no longer have that site issue. So I think for our purposes, yeah, I think what we have is defensible. I think it would be up to a road agent working out the details of a driveway permit to see if there needed to be minor tweaks of move a couple feet to the left or right, or grade by a couple inches, make sure that you cut the weeds down, that sort of thing.
Okay. Does that answer your questions? Okay. Anyone else? Did we open public comment? Yes, we did.
We
did
opened
last
and
time.
closed a public hearing last time. It might be worth reopening and reclosing again this time. We also did not act on the waivers last time.
Correct.
And then I'm making some changes to the plan, or to the conditions of approval as we go.
Okay.
So new number 1, make the following changes to the plan. Update note 12 to identify the source of the contour data. Everything else will be renumbered then. So the new number 2, I would suggest if we're amenable to moving driveway permits, on new condition number 2, strike the words "and Town of Northwood driveway permits." So it would now read, including but not limited to a subdivision permit from NHDES, except as specifically denoted below. The remaining requirements prior to signing of plans would be unchanged. Prior to issuance of the building permit, then we would add a new number 7, since we're renumbering these as 5, 6, 7. A Town of Northwood driveway permit shall be issued for each lot prior to the issuance of a building permit for that lot.
And that preserves their flexibility then in terms of...
That would grant them the flexibility, and it would also mean that they would be getting a driveway permit as they're building each individual lot. They wouldn't have to get all 3 driveway permits if they were selling these individually.
They might not.
Right.
So the first one, the very first one was just the
So
delineation of
new
the
number
trail.
1, add, make changes to the plan, and that was what we talked about with note 12 to make sure we source that contour data. So we're renumbering everything below it then, so
Right.
1 becomes 2, that's where we're striking the driveway permit.
Right.
2 becomes 3, 3 becomes 4. And then prior to issuance of the building permit, 4 is 5, 5 is 6. New number 7, Town of Northwood driveway permit for each lot prior to building permit for that lot. Now that we've got those potential conditions on the table, I would suggest opening the public hearing.
Exactly. At this time, for members of the public and abutters, if you'd like to speak, I'll open the public comment section. Just need to speak into the microphone, or, yep, microphone's on the right, and you'll probably have to turn it on, and Gary will correct you if need be. And just state your name. Seeing no activity, I'll close the public comment section of 18-13, or 15, sorry. Okay, we have 2 waivers requested, section 410. Essentially, we're asking for a waiver for the entire 4.71.
47.1.
Or 40, yeah, thank you, 47.1 parcel. Okay, discussion. I'd entertain a motion.
I move to grant the waiver on section 410.
Second?
Okay, motion by Mr. Kreider, second by Ms. Baldwin. Discussion on the waiver. I think the applicant's done what we ask and
Yeah,
brought, with a reasonable amount of effort, they've
yeah, good.
brought us in to maybe somewhat conformity with the rest of our applications. So, okay? Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Those abstaining? Okay. So that one is good. And a waiver request for section 3.01D, lot size, shape, size, and character. Essentially, site lot lines, say that 10 times fast, shall be generally at right angles or radial to street lines.
I move we grant waiver to section 310D.
Okay. Second?
Second?
Motion by Kreider, second by,
Work tonight.
yeah, second by Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you.
Hey, she has to work on Tuesday nights, so.
Oh,
Me too.
okay.
Discussion on waiver for 301D.
Well, this matches some of the other lots that are just
Exactly.
down the road,
Yeah.
so
They're almost all parallel, so
I think it's better to keep them
Uniform.
I
uniform.
think this is a
It's the curb in the road.
dot the i's across the t aspect, so it's fine. Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, those abstaining? Okay. Okay. And you're clear on the draft of conditions that James read?
Any, no questions on those? You understand them all?
I haven't actually, I mean, I've got parts of them here, but
Okay.
from what I heard, I think I'm good.
Do you want to read them again?
Sure. Number 1, make the following changes to the plan. Update note 12 to identify the source of the contour data. Number 2, the applicant will acquire and provide copies of all necessary federal, state, and local permits to the town, including but not limited to a subdivision permit from NHDES, except as specifically denoted below. Number 3, deliver 3 signed and stamped copies of the plan for signature. Number 4, provide certification of monument installation as required by section 3.06 of the subdivision regulations. Prior to the issuance of the building permit. Number 5, record the plat with the Rockingham County Registry of Deeds within 1 year of this decision. Number 6, provide a state-approved septic design. Number 7, a Town of Northwood driveway permit shall be issued for each lot prior to issuance of a building permit for that lot.
For some reason I got screwed up on my number, sorry. I thought it was more than a one shift. Sorry, you just bumped them back one.
Yeah.
All right.
That's okay. It happens.
There we
That's
go.
why I always like to make sure that
Yeah.
if there's any questions about conditions beforehand, they get
Okay.
read as a draft.
I just like making plan changes first and foremost.
Yep, that's fine.
Yep, same way. Okay. If the board has nothing else, I'd entertain a motion
Move to approve.
I second.
with conditions as stated.
Move to approve with the 7 conditions as stated.
Second.
So a motion by Mr. Kreider, second by Ms. Boudreau. Discussion on the motion. I think, just as an aside, this is one of the faster subdivisions with as much flexibility as you came in with that we've approved. It's been nice seeing that.
They look tired, I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you for getting it to guys like
We
this
still gotta
this
vote
meeting
yet.
as well.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, those abstaining.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you. Or worry now, you got, oh, it's on you.
Thank you guys,
Okay, thanks,
appreciate
Joe.
it, all the effort.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you. Try to get the kids in college. Get
There
them
you
college.
go. It's always the kids, isn't it?
You want these guys?
Do you like, I think you like to keep them, don't you?
I sense that, didn't you?
I did sense that.
If you want them, I'll give you.
That's okay. I have ones that are folded up.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to bring them to school because the kids are, kindergarten, and we're doing the whole STEM stuff and science, and I think they have fun looking at blue pets.
And for the record, Ms. Smith, B. Smith has rejoined us and has added the voting designation. Excuse me.
Mr. Chair, I do want to note briefly, since there are members of the public here, and I think I saw a few more come in and out, there was a public hearing for the case that we just heard because it was continued to tonight from a prior meeting. But everything else is going to be on the work session agenda, so there won't be a public hearing for the other agenda items tonight that will take place at the meeting on, is it the 25th?
2 weeks.
Yes.
2 weeks from tonight.
So we're just going, this is basically just discussion of work
This
session.
is distribution of materials and 10,000-foot view of questions.
We will have some process things to discuss, especially since I'm not going to be at that meeting. I just want to make sure there aren't any process questions and that you all understand what you're considering, but we won't be accepting any of these as complete tonight.
Okay. Since I brought, sure.
Would you consider doing 18 and 19 before 13, just so that we get through those?
Sure. We can certainly do that.
Are you anticipating that one is going to take more time than the others?
I'm just thinking if I get tired, I'd at least like to get these others out of the way so that.
Oh, that's an option.
Wow.
Are you here for a particular case?
Yeah, 13.
13?
Oh, well, then maybe I misspoke then. Sorry. Okay, then I retract my request.
Okay, sure.
Sorry.
Okay, so
Are
let's
you
go
here
in.
representing the application?
Yeah, I'm just listening.
Okay, let's dig out.
Sit up here just so I can hear.
Pardon me?
Okay, if I sit up here just so I can.
Sure.
Should we get him to become an alternate now?
Yeah. You just joined.
I mean, he's here, we can
Okay.
pressure him into becoming an alternate.
Thank you.
So we're not
Yep.
jumping ahead.
Wow. Okay, just realize that, you know, we're not taking public comment at this point.
Yep, I understand.
Okay,
Right.
so let's discuss introduce 1813, which if you haven't gotten,
So
looks like everybody
this
has it.
is a site plan for an excavation. Due to the amount of activities on site, we would consider site plan review necessary. However, one thing that I noted, and it's number 2, so it's pretty close to the top, this would also require an excavation permit
From the state?
from you.
So what,
RSA 155E governs excavations. That covers the permit process in the absence of any other local excavation regulations. And that application requires some specific materials, most notably a reclamation plan that weren't submitted with the site plan. So I think this could still go forward with only site plan approval and require the excavation plan as a condition of approval. If the applicant really wants to do it that way. But they should be aware that getting site plan approval is not the only thing they need from the town of Northwood to be able to start excavation operations. Alternatively, they can submit the other missing materials from the excavation application. I've noted all the specific sections in the RSA. I think they phrase this as an expansion to an existing gravel pit or quarry operation, which, looking at the way the state defines an excavation, they consider any contiguous parcels where the excavation is happening to be part of one excavation. So I think that position is consistent with the state's interpretation, but the RSA is also clear that if you're expanding or altering that permit, you have to go through the same process as if you were getting a new permit. So I don't think the fact that this is an expansion versus a new excavation changes that excavation permit in any way.
James, excuse me, I want to make sure I understand the excavation permit stuff. I thought on the original plan, and I might have this completely wrong, but I thought on the original plan, the state was somehow involved with the excavation plan or approval of the excavation plan. Is that incorrect?
The excavation permit will come from you. The alteration of terrain permit that will be required because there is greater than 100,000 square feet of disturbance. I think, in fact, it's approximately 1.7 million square feet of disturbance. That bumps this into AOT territory. So NHDES will be reviewing for alteration of terrain.
Okay. Okay, that was good. Thank you.
Any other questions related to the excavation permit? You should all have your New Hampshire land use regulation books in case you need to refer to that specific language.
Yep.
This is a use that's permitted in the general district if it meets certain performance criteria. So make sure you take a look at those to make sure you're comfortable that it meets all of those. I believe there are only 4 that apply. And off the top of my head, I recall that one of them is lighting, so keep those in mind also when we get to the waiver requests.
Lighting?
There are lighting performance criteria that are part of that performance criteria set up for certain uses. And the applicant has requested a waiver from submitting a lighting plan because they are not proposing to put any additional lighting on the site.
Okay, I'll have to look at that one. Lighting for excavation, was a surprise, but so be it.
I think we only have 2 sets of performance criteria. The less extensive ones and the more extensive ones. The less extensive ones include lighting because they're considering other site plan uses. So that would be a situation where if the board feels the site is adequately lit as proposed for the use, that would be something you could consider. If you think it's not adequate, you could discuss what some options for adding lighting would be. Number 4, the access drive. So the narrative for this describes a woods road that's going into the site, and you can see it on the various sheets of the site plan. And I've sort of been trying to figure out what to do with that. It's at least 4,800 feet long. From what I've been able to measure just using an engineering scale on the site plan. There are portions that if you were then driving further to the furthest extents of some of the pits, you're going to be a mile in. The Town of Northwood zoning ordinance defines a driveway as access to one lot. It says that the planning board can authorize shared driveways to more than one lot, but in no instance shall a driveway be substituted for a private road. And I think given the length of the woods road accessing the back and the number of parcels involved, I feel like we are more in private road territory than driveway territory. The next step to think about then is that that's a long way back. The applicant has also requested a waiver to the requirements for an auto and pedestrian circulation plan. So there's not a lot of information about the condition of that woods road. I would like more information about the condition of that woods road, whether it's an explanation of consistent width, it appears to be variable on the plan, pavement conditions, things like that. For 67441 approvals off of private roads, we would typically require that the private road be upgraded to meet the standards of an emergency lane. Whether it was coming through on subdivision or whether it was going through 67441 with the Board of Selectmen. This does not require 67441 approval. They aren't going to need a building permit out back. But I think some discussion about the conditions of that woods road are warranted. Wetlands, the applicant has indicated in the narrative that they are expecting 12,800 square feet of wetland buffer impacts, which requires a special exception from the ZBA. They have filed that special exception. Has the ZBA acted on it yet? Okay. So they will potentially be acting on it the Monday before your next meeting. It wasn't clear to me whether that 12,800 square feet included both wetland buffer impacts and wetland impacts, because they're showing crossings of wetlands using that woods road. So I wanted to clarify that, hopefully as soon as possible, in case there are changes that needed to be made to the ZBA request. And any impacts to the wetlands themselves would require a DES wetlands permit that we wouldn't be able to waive or vary. And then steep slopes, they haven't shown steep slope areas on the plan. I know they're zoomed way out, and I didn't go in with an engineering scale and calculate any of the sketchy bits. But I think that would be something that we would like to see, because that's an overlay that should be depicted. You have 7 requested waivers on this. And then the conditions of approval that I laid out were as if we were moving forward with the site plan right now and coming back with an application for a Northwood excavation permit.
And we are in, this is in the conservation overlay zone?
It is, it is in the conservation overlay zone. The applicant received a special exception to allow excavation in the conservation overlay zone in 2009. And I neglected to add something to the conditions of approval that they should also add a note to the plan citing that approval. I think they mentioned it in their narrative, but we'd like to see that on the plan set as well.
Okay, and based on the DES's approval that this is actually an expansion of an existing excavation.
DES hasn't issued an approval or an indication or a ruling on that. That's my interpretation of the language in the RSA, that the applicant has described this as an expansion. To me, that fits with how the RSA reads, but whether it's an expansion or a new application doesn't change the process in any way.
Right, okay. I'm just curious about, well, is that a decision that DES makes?
No.
No. They've given approval.
DES has not given approval for the excavation. DES's job with excavations is the alteration of terrain permit.
Okay.
So that's where they're going to come in.
Okay.
RSA 155E is a state law, but it's a state law that's administered
Right.
by the municipality.
So I guess where I'm having difficulties with, and if it's not appropriate to talk at this night, but I'm still thinking it's not the details of the site plan. If we're in the conservation overlay zone for this lot, which we only allow single-family residential development for, they haven't requested a waiver for that. Can we even grant a waiver for that?
There is no waiver for that. That's in the zoning code. The ZBA has already issued that. It issued that permission in 2009, and it's still on the books.
For this lot?
For all of them.
Yeah.
For all of them, okay. Well, that's what I was wondering.
There was a prior one, I think in 2006-ish, that was for some of these lots, but that was superseded by the 2009 one. So from a zoning perspective, this is permitted with those performance criteria.
Thank you. That's what I was wondering.
James, what's the sequence of events for alteration of terrain permit versus our approvals?
Alteration of terrain is a state permit. We cannot decline to act pending state permits. So I'm not sure whether the applicant has filed for an alteration of terrain yet or not. It's possible that they're waiting to see whether they can get through the local process first. So we would require the alteration of terrain to be issued prior to final approval, so before the plans can be signed.
That'd be a condition.
But that would be a condition of approval. We can't decline to act pending that permit.
No, I was thinking more along the lines of, does that alteration of terrain permit give us any information that might be helpful in terms of our consideration?
It would include things like a basic analysis of stormwater and runoff and that sort of thing. If you'll recall, when we were discussing Johnson's expansion, that also needed an alteration of terrain. And in that case, the board felt comfortable with most of that stormwater discussion happening under alteration of terrain permit from the state, rather than duplicating a lot of that review here at the local level. The applicant has also, on this case, requested a waiver from stormwater, so I would think that your consideration of that waiver in the stormwater plan would take into account the extent to which DES is going to look at that as part of alteration of terrain.
Right, okay. Can you, oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back over the considerations for the access drive? So, they've already got a road in, and they've got 2 phases in their existing stuff. Is the 4,800 feet beyond that, or is that from the highway?
So I think if you look at sheet 2 of your plan set, there's this zoomed out version of the plan that's at 1 inch equals approximately 200, or 1 inch equals 200 feet. That sheet shows the entire extent of the Woods Road, and it's shown on the other plans as well, but that sheet is a good overview of where that road goes. So that road is depicted as existing. And you can see a little bit of it in segments on the map geo. But I also haven't been on site, so I'm not aware of the current conditions of that road.
Well, so maybe it's just a general comment I have. I'd like to, as much as possible while we're going through this, make sure we have as accurate numbers as we can. So like, the road, is it, 5,000, is it 6,000, is it 3,000? And, like you talked about the wetlands, what's the real number for the wetlands and what does it include, what doesn't include, so we're clear.
The road does include several branches.
Yeah.
Like I said, I measured it with an engineering scale at approximately 4,800 feet. But portions, if you had to extend that road, then, as I suspect you would, go into some of the pits as they get further and further into excavation, would go beyond that.
Right.
Okay. I can't tell you from the last time a similar application came up, pulling on my old man hat. Were you even on the board then for the last time?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, you were. You probably were. This was quite complicated and took a good while of back and forth between the board and the applicant to meet to come to an approval. And it was quite a learning experience. Just make sure you put your thinking caps on for this case. Yes. I was thinking there's somebody else here I know who's been here, so. Yeah.
So, Bob, one of the things
Sure.
that I was thinking about, and maybe it's just me, but I did struggle a little bit looking at these and then trying to tie them into the overall picture. And I'm sort of wondering if it's possible for them to easily just, like you sometimes see in the newspaper, okay, this is the section that's on page 6, this is the section that's on page 7. Did I miss that, or because I kept flipping through these and I had trouble orienting.
Oh. Reading the blue.
They don't have a reference sheet that shows the contents of each sheet.
Yeah, that might be helpful.
That's something that's frequently done with tax maps.
Done at what?
With tax maps, you've got one map that shows the entire town and all of the reference maps then, so you can figure out where you're looking.
Or even on the location map, doing an overlay of that to say sheet, or duplicating.
Yeah, I just I was trying to go through and match up things, and I just struggled with it, and I think we might have difficulty understanding things without some help on that.
Okay.
I guess I'd use as an example sheet 7. I'm not sure exactly where that fits. And yeah, that was just that's what I struggled with. Ultimately you can, if you spend time with it, you might be able to remember them all, but I think it's pretty hard to keep in your mind when you're trying to flip back and forth and stuff. So anyway,
Is this the road?
well, that's what I'm saying, but now where is that road relative to, in this path here? That's what is this the wetlands here, or is that over here? Because that looks sort of the same way too, and there's a road over here.
Looking at,
Goes over
just
close
reference.
in the back.
So it looks like
Looking at sheet
the
7.
curly things are the curly
Sheet
things here.
7,
Sheet 7 appear, and if you reference it on sheet 3 of X,
3 of that.
it is the
Yeah.
portion of the lot, the hammerhead closest to you,
Yeah.
at the bottom of the page, closest to the engineering block. So that, yeah, your finger is almost on it.
Yeah, see the curly things right there? It's curly right there.
No.
Yeah, and then there's the,
There's a
there's,
left.
there's
Where-
the road.
Hal, look at your left hand.
Yeah, I know where my left hand is.
Yep.
And I
That
see,
part-
and I see a road at the top.
Exactly. Move your hand closer to your body. That portion of the lot is sheet 7.
It must be turned the other way then.
Yes,
I guess that makes my point.
yes.
So
How,
I'm
how
not
would,
dis- I'm
how
not
would I guess
disagreeing.
that?
I'm not disagreeing with you.
How,
Just
how would I have guessed
giving
that?
you an example that,
you need a highlighter. Say, this is what this is.
and that's completely reasonable to do. I know
Yeah.
we've had other,
I
and it's
got
not criticism at all of
Hey,
we
I-
go through and highlight.
I love my highlighters.
I got a portion of the way through coloring my site plan with colored pencils yesterday, and then realized that if I finished coloring with colored pencils, I was never going to finish my staff report. So
Well, I mean,
But it's
just-
relaxing, isn't it?
it is.
It's just something to consider in terms of how long it'll take to get through it.
Ooh, it's a tricolor. Thanks, Gary.
That is one reason why we typically get multiple copies of plans, so that each one can have one, each member can have their own, and mark them up, note,
Okay,
do
so
whatever.
I'm
I know I have a lot
I
of
didn't
fun
get
with
one.
those, so.
Yes. Hey, you gotta get your
It's,
own.
it's over. It's on my side more.
Okay.
I would, again, suggest that in a case like this, take it in bites. We're not going to, most likely, deal with all of this in one night. And as a result of some of those, it might be such a thing that we come prepared for, well, parts, we should come prepared for the whole thing, to see, but realizing this will be quite complicated, we might want to just deal with parts of it at that evening. Now, if it's just the access drive we want to concentrate on in one night, let's concentrate on the access drive. But we need to be prepared as a board and an applicant to, well, the applicant should be prepared for the whole thing, but, you know, if we decide we're going to deal with the access driveway and the excavation permit, or whatever we decide, you can do that and then
So are we
review
looking at
notes
all
that-
of the lots that they own? Because she has that one spot that's highlighted in blue. So I'm assuming
Yes.
that's the spot that actually
That's this one.
we'll be working on, right?
No.
No, that's the existing lot.
So are they putting in,
This is the
putting it
existing
way out back.
approved, and this is the new. She's showing
Yeah.
this.
okay. So really, it's not,
So there are
this
a
then,
total
it's
of
up
8
here.
different lots that are part of this application.
The two that are shown there, you can see the little,
Yeah.
that's this one right here.
8.
And the lot next to it is where he already
Okay, yes.
has his, that's where it's whitish there. That's
Right.
the other plot that's outlined there.
8.
That's really
Eight
just
shown.
kind of off of the, are you looking at sheet 2?
I'm looking at sheet 3 of
It
X.
says 8.
Is that the big one?
Yeah, the big one that shows the entire site.
I think they are merging on that plan some of the lots at the rear for the point of clarity on where the pits are instead of clarity on where the lot boundaries are.
Okay. If there's a better,
Can you scroll up to the back lots?
Can you get a little bit smaller so we can see all of it? Please? Thank you.
there you
That's like all.
Oh, yes, okay.
So
Yeah.
I think we're coming back here, and then I think they
Yeah.
merge these three on
Yes.
that plan,
Okay.
so that there aren't even more lines cluttering it,
Yeah.
because there are a lot of lines.
Yes. Yep. That's why I was just asking for clarification on,
So this is a right of way or is, used to be a right of way?
I think that's PSNH.
Okay, so it's a separate lot?
Don't know.
Because
That's something
on there-
to determine.
Yeah,
I think it is both a lot and an easement.
Because that's where the PSNH lines come through.
Power lines are through there.
This is a lot, but the easement covers most of that lot.
Yeah.
that's bizarre.
That's the way it did. It was done.
Oh. That to be bizarre. Yeah. I should go look at mine and see if my easement is a lot.
Okay. Other questions on? Does the board want to request a, well, what you would call it, a table of contents drawing for reference?
Well, I think it would help me, but I think it's really the applicant. Because, I mean, if we don't understand where things are, and it takes us many meetings to just understand what we've got, to even decide if we have a complete set of what we need to even accept the application. I mean, it's really, you know, their choice. I mean, and I'll just say, if I don't understand something and don't know it in complete detail, I'd be hesitant to say we have everything to approve a complete application. So if it takes us, you know, 4 months to get through because we can't figure things out, you know, that's, I mean, it's just the way it would, I'm not saying it would take 4 months, but,
You just went, oh crap.
well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's gonna be easy and, you know, but I spent an hour trying to just sort of sort through and doing this stuff, and I found it difficult. And if, you know, I'm pointing to one thing and you think I'm pointing to something else, and then you're saying, no, we're over here, I think it'll take a long time to get through, so, I mean.
So basically, we should all have one of these, and you should color code all of them for us, the same. So we can say the pink.
No, I don't intend to do that, so.
It would be helpful though, really.
So, I mean, really, from my perspective, it's,
Maybe what I'll do, well, if you don't want to make a formal request to the applicant for a table of contents drawing, I'm okay with that. But I think what I'll try to do, or somebody should try to do, is to develop our own based on Nat Geo, and just say, this is sheet.
I'll take care of it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I think that would be better for everybody involved.
I agree.
Probably quicker for you.
Because if you don't find it complete, you're just going to have to tell them what you need
right.
to find it complete. And
Well,
if
it's
what
already
you
part of the
need
application.
is an overview of exactly what sheet is what sheet,
Yeah.
well, I'm just thinking, you know,
Better to ask
then we
now.
spend a bunch of time on it, and then we start getting into the public comment. And now the public's gonna ask all these questions, and I mean, if we can't be clear,
Okay.
I just think it's gonna be a struggle, but that's just my opinion.
Okay. Otherwise, this will be something you'll become familiar with.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I can predict that. Okay. There's one. Moving on.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're looking at 1818. Do we have? Nope. Oh, it's a minor section.
Is there a handout on 1818?
We hand out information? It's in full.
Hey, give me my drawers.
I know, they're heavy.
Yes, okay.
Nice kid.
So in your folder, you'll find 1818.
Oh,
Which is minor.
oh, excuse me. Will you grab mine too, please? Yeah, thank you.
Essentially adding a 2,400 square foot building.
This is essentially a home business application. Home businesses require a home business permit to be issued by the town planner after consultation with the building inspector. The town planner has not yet issued a home business permit on this one because the town planner has not yet had the opportunity to consult with the business or building inspector. So that will be a next week item. If I can.
No, I don't think that's the case. Do you remember the discussion we had? This is actually a minor site plan. But in error, he submitted the home business application.
I think
He's building a new building.
he is building a new
Yeah.
building, which is why it needs site plan approval.
But there was something I thought that kicked him out of home business.
Well, there's the list of criteria that if you meet all of these, you don't even need site plan approval.
Correct.
And he fails on number 7, which requires the home business to be owned and operated by a resident of the property.
Ah, that's what it was.
And my understanding is they intend to convert the house on the property for year-round residence, but have not yet done so. So it's
That
still a
could be
seasonal.
way in the future. Though. He wants this to go forward at this meeting and get approved. Because he wants to build this first. Maybe it's just a lack of communication. He's not looking for a home business. He's looking for a minor site plan.
Okay.
And that's how it was actually noticed. I think the confusion came because I think you met with him. You met with him, with me.
This one?
Mm-hmm. Maybe you didn't. Maybe it was Dale.
I met with.
I'm
I
sorry.
think you
No,
told
it
me about
wasn't-
this one
no,
on the phone.
No, you didn't meet with him. It was Dale. Sorry.
Gun parts.
The ones that you do come, I forget. This one I'm putting you there. It's just the opposite.
So he fails on the home business issue by that one item, which is what kicks this up. But I think apart from that first bullet point, and really apart from point A underneath it, everything is probably still relevant. The property boundaries on this one differ from that on the town's tax maps and on Map Geo. When there's a difference between GIS and survey data, we go with the survey data. So I'm not worried about the fact that their plan looks different from our map. One question that I had, there's a bold or a complete line on the left side for the property line, and there's a hashed line on the right side for the property line. They've labeled the hatched one as an approximate lot line that was not surveyed, which I'm interpreting to mean that the solid line was the ground surveyed line, but I'd like to see that confirmed and labeled. The driveway then is shown as paved for the first, I think, 200, 250 feet, and it enters the property in the side setback. There are multiple ways that could have happened. The driveway could be older than the side setback requirement. If that's the case, I'd just like it to be labeled and to have that non-conforming status recognized on the plan. That driveway could have been permitted as the result of a variance to cross through the side setback. If that's the case, I'd like to have the reference to that variance and the date that it was approved added to the plan. If neither of those is the case, then this would be a non-compliant driveway and it would need a variance to be allowed. Typically, we've required zoning actions to be finished before the planning board will act.
So is the applicant aware of that, James?
I haven't spoken with the applicant
Oh,
since I
okay.
finished these.
Yeah,
I wrapped this up today.
that might be worthwhile talking about.
I can tell you where the communication breakdown occurred was because it was by phone and not email, so it was the day the application came in. We talked, and I said,
Yeah,
I got the
and that
wrong
was a long
application,
time
and
ago.
then when you went to look at it, you saw home business, and, yeah.
And I ran with
Usually
that.
we communicate more through email, which is helpful, because then you can get back and
Right.
review.
Okay.
So with that in mind, there might be some, this is a pretty good site plan as informal site plans go, but there might be some minor site plan requirements that we would need either to get or get waivers for. The one that immediately jumps to mind that I thought of and then didn't follow through on because I was thinking of this as a home business site plan application is that I think we typically require surveyed plans, and if the entire lot hasn't been surveyed, I would prefer to have a waiver to only have a survey that covers the relevant portion. Similar to the one on the subdivision for the large lot.
So you've not formally reviewed this yet, James?
I mean, I have, these are my comments, but there are obviously some changes. Did you not get a copy of
That's what I
the
was
staff
looking for. I didn't
reports?
see it.
And you can put new business on this.
You made copies of this one, right?
I got,
Yes, I did.
It's 1880.
Did it
they
not
all
get passed
have it.
around?
You don't have it?
It's on, should have a triple page. It's on the back of 1815.
oh. On the back of 8, oh, sorry, James.
So now that you found it, Hal, under number 1, just consider that to be general background information and cross out paragraph A. That's not relevant anymore.
But this is survey. Oh, this
But
one
this
is.
isn't. So we would want that waiver to allow an incomplete survey of the lot.
Mhm.
And will that be waiver recommendation to be conveyed to the applicant?
Yes. And I'll be sure to copy Linda on that so there's no confusion when I'm out the day of the meeting.
I'm making a note, but I'm to myself, but I'd rather double check that at least there are 2 heads thinking about that. Okay. Other questions on 1818? 1819.
1819 is a minor site plan to revise site grading and drainage. There's an existing retaining wall that is starting to crumble, for lack of a better word. So in order to replace that, they're proposing some grading changes that will require a site plan approval. They're not proposing a change in use, so we don't, I don't think we need driveway and septic permits or plans because this isn't changing the traffic on site. There might be some changes for construction, but that wouldn't require a different driveway permit. Wetlands, the applicant has submitted a request to impact approximately 750 square feet of wetlands. That request was submitted to the ZBA simultaneously with the site plan being filed, so they will have the opportunity to act on it on the 22nd. If they do, then you'll be all good to go, at least as far as zoning aspects go. If they don't act on it, that would be when you'd have to have a discussion about whether you would require the zoning action in place before you're willing to make a motion, or whether you feel comfortable adding that as a condition of approval. I've added it as a recommended condition of approval just in case. In either case, we would want to see that approval and the date of approval added to the plan for future reference. This is one that I think the town would probably want some bonding in place to cover the site work. If, for example, that retaining wall is failing now and they don't get their approvals, or they go out of business before they get their approvals and they decide just not to move forward with it and not to do the repairs, that would be something we would want the town to be able to step in and do, instead of eventually taking this for back taxes and having a crumbling piece of infrastructure. So I think learning from the Johnson's experience, it makes sense to me to have the applicant and the engineer discuss what that bonding and escrow amount for inspections would be prior to final approval. They don't have to pay it prior to final approval, they just have to agree, yes, this is the amount. If they can't come to agreement, the applicant can always come back for a compliance with conditions hearing and say, we've tried to be reasonable, we've tried to come to an amount, and we think that your engineer is being unreasonable. And then the board can step in and figure out what to do next from there. Then prior to beginning of site work, we would want to have those bond and escrow accounts and payments in place.
So just to double check on your conditions number 1, if the board decides that we want the ZBA action completed before we hear this, we would find the application incomplete based on that reason?
I would suggest that as being the most logical, just because we have a small ZBA right now. I would be a little worried about finding the application complete and then possibly having quorum issues or something like that that would mean that we can't meet the 65-day deadline. Hopefully it'll be a moot point and everything will get taken care of. But if you don't feel comfortable with that as a condition, by opening the application, you'd be taking a chance.
The board, you understand all that aspect of it? Just double checking. I mean, that's going to be the first question for the,
Yeah.
typically, not trying to prejudge it, but,
So,
there's that big, well, I shouldn't say it big, but that aspect of the ZBA needs to make a decision before we can actually
Right.
hear this, if that's the way you want to proceed, or they hear it afterward. After we make our decision, we have no chance to review.
I mean, either way, they won't be able to do site work without getting that approval.
Right.
Either way, they wouldn't have final approval from this board without that approval. And you would always be able to, if something happened that dragged this out for a long time and things started changing on you, you'd always be able to revoke your approval, or they'd have to come back to amend things if stuff changed too much.
Which would also be the case if the ZBA denies approval. They'd have to come back.
If the ZBA denies approval, then yeah, if you've already approved this conditionally, it's not getting final approval. They're going to have to figure out another way to amend that.
so
And just to be clear, the part that is having a problem does not require the special exception. The part that's
It's almost
breaking-
entirely a temporary impact so that they can actually grade and construct.
Well, no, it's on the other side of the building. What they're doing is they're being proactive and they're gonna do the entire thing.
Oh, yeah.
that's what I was just going to ask.
So they could actually
They could make repairs
repairs to.
without the special
Right,
exception. They're choosing or suggesting
to
that
be
they
proactive
should
and they're gonna,
replace the whole thing.
knowing that part of it is, they
Okay.
don't want to see the backside near the wetland have a problem. So they figure if some of it is, eventually it may in the back as well.
So the repair is on the upper left side, James, of the drawing? At least the drawing I have says proposed stabilized construction exit.
The grading one.
Or maybe,
No, they're actually gonna do all the repairs as proposed.
Right, but do they mark on here?
well, actually it says proposed riprap
Yes,
is all along there.
it's the clouded area, right? So if you look at the existing conditions plan, sheet 2 of 4,
Sheet 2 of 4, oops. here.
you look at the one-story masonry convenience store and go up. You should see what looks like a drawn-in, sort of clouded area.
Yeah,
That's the area that the wall is currently failing.
It actually says area of wall failure.
I don't see that. Am I looking at the wrong
Wiggly
place?
line. it looks like a caterpillar.
Yeah. So where does it say what you're saying, Dee?
It's labeled area of wall failure. So that's the area that
Here.
is
Oh,
currently
area of wall
failing.
failure.
So it's this-
Jesus.
So it's just above, if you're
I
looking
agree.
at the overhead, it's just above the 23-052-000.
That's 'cause I couldn't see that.
No, I got it circled in red.
But as part of that, since that wall is failing, if the wall were to fail elsewhere, their options for replacing it are really one of two things. They could build another retaining wall like immediately next to it and figure out a way to knock down the first one, and they could theoretically do that without impacting the wetlands, but it would be close. Or they're suggesting, rather than replace it with another retaining wall, they want to support the retaining wall with a gradual slope. That gradual slope in landscaping and grading is going to go into the wetland buffer and part of the wetland.
So they are going to do all along that whole wall?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So everything apart from the property lines that's in black on sheet 3 is what they're proposing to be new. The sort of faded gray is the carryover from the sheet before.
So what's the line, solid line with the little triangles? Is that the edge of what they're putting in? I don't understand what that little.
Where are you talking?
Where did that label go?
Well, if you follow it, on sheet 3 of 4, you follow it along the top, and then you go up to the upper right-hand side. It sort of jogs along in a sort of weird shape,
Oh,
and it's a line with little triangles.
triangles on it.
What does that mean?
I think that's the boundary of their work area,
Is that,
because it goes around the,
that might be temporary erosion control,
Yes,
because it goes around.
proprietary silt fence. It's labeled on the bottom right-hand corner,
Bottom.
so that's what it is.
There it is.
Yeah, proposed silt fence.
So that'll be there during construction to make sure that silt and sediment don't get into the wetlands, don't go off-site. So it's part of their erosion control.
As part of the special exception, they did go to the
what's happening to
Conservation
the retention
Commission
pond.
and did a
Nothing.
presentation on the entire thing to them.
But they are calling it a temporary stockpile area.
They're regrading the entire basin and removing all the vegetation and stuff.
Yes, and they're condensing, well, we're talking about the details. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be.
Okay, I just wondered, they're splitting it this way instead of the way it is now.
Yep.
Other than that, they had no issues. But they wanted the ZBA approval.
So they're gonna calculate that for the ZBA.
And there are sets of
Also, they're making it
full-size
smaller,
prints
it's right
over
here,
here
see
if you
like
want.
this?
Yeah. And this is what they need the approval for.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so I can see why you're saying that's coming up. The zoning board question comes up first.
Yep.
Okay.
Well,
we can just
it
ask
impacts
more. They
what the
should
board
have
wants, how the board wants to act.
And then what questions we ask and all the
Yeah,
details.
well, if it's
Yeah.
just to figure out whether it's, if you want to see ZBA action beforehand, or whether you're okay discussing this and with that as a condition.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Okay. Sorry? Yeah, the Moria ones. Well, I am absolutely fine, speaking just for myself, I'm not going to speak for anybody else on the board, if when an applicant comes in with, in a short number of drawings, if you just want to pull the number that you need for record keeping before we
Well,
even see them,
not- it was
that's
just-
fine.
The ZBA has theirs. Luckily, there's only 4 people in the ZBA. So you could have part of that.
If any of the planning members, or if anybody who might want to serve on the ZBA, we really, really need folks.
I thought you couldn't do ZBA and planning.
You can't do
You
ZBA,
can't,
Oh,
but if you know of somebody who's interested,
saying, get the
Somebody-
word out.
yeah, okay.
I think up to
Everybody's trying.
one of you can volunteer.
pardon me?
Planning board members are allowed to serve on other boards,
But only one.
but I think it's limited to one. It's certainly no more than 2.
Yeah,
No, it's
I
only
thought you-
one. I think it's only one.
but you can only serve on one land use board at a time.
Nope. Other communities have planning board members that are ex officio members on, for example, the Conservation Commission or the Agricultural Commission.
That I knew.
But we've never had one on both, and the selectmen appoint, so that would be up to
Yeah.
them.
Chris Parker was trying to get me to also join Dover ZBA.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I decided that was too many evening meetings.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the cases. Our next big topic is zoning amendments.
Oh, let me.
Okay, we have a.
Does everybody have a copy of that packet?
No, I just did not hand it out till we were ready.
We're always ready for zoning amendments.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
but I mean, so they didn't have too many sheets of paper in front of them. Ooh, big print.
Well, this isn't even nice. It's not neat.
Why don't we take a 5-minute recess, just to read
Great
over
idea.
that and, okay. We are up to zoning amendments.
All right, so I think you have 9 pages in front of you. I guess I'll start off with the one you don't have in front of you.
That's a good one. Number 10.
Which is the Wetlands Conservation Overlay District. I ran out of time, so that's why you don't have that one tonight. And I think how you would like me to proceed is going to be a little bit budget dependent. Previously, our understanding between SRPC and the town has been that my contract is an average of 43 hours a month, and that we can go over 1 month and under the next, provided we come out even in the end. Linda reached out to us and indicated that because of some budget issues in the town right now, for the remainder of the year, we would have to change that understanding. I would still have 43 hours a month, but that was a hard cap that I can't go over. As of leaving the office yesterday, I had used 22, I believe. And I spent most of my day on Northwood today. So I only have so much flexibility for the rest of this month. It's going to help that I'm not going to be at a meeting the second half of this month, but keep that in mind in terms of what kind of zoning changes I can do to this month and what would just need to be punted till November when I have hours again.
Okay. And these are, just to clarify for the board, these are due to do when to get on the ballot?
These you should have, well, your public hearing could be as early as late December, early January.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think
You want everything
last
decided,
year,
and James will probably, are you planning to write the,
yeah, I can write the ballot language
Questions.
like I did last year.
that comes later.
Yeah. So I think last year at the first meeting in December, we referred exact language to a public hearing,
Exactly.
is our timeline. I think we started a little bit earlier this year. We actually started a little bit later, but we didn't have a subcommittee process. So I think we're ahead of schedule. I think we've got the flexibility that if there are changes, we can make it work.
Okay. Okay.
So with the wetland conservation overlay, I think that's related to the First Amendment, which is trying to sort out the definition of a structure and the definition of driveway. I think there was some confusion from the ZBA about what exactly some of the different requirements and criteria that they were considering special exceptions to allow structures meant, and how they interacted with site plan and all of that. So there are still things that would be improved by being cleaned up, but I think the biggest problem was whether you can put driveways through or not, and what requires a special exception. And I think that that pressing issue is going to be cleared up with these definitions. So if you like, I can come back to this at the beginning of next month and try and make changes to the wetlands section, or we can punt on that for next year. For the definitions themselves, the direction that I got from the board was try to make our understanding of the way we currently interpret this be reflected in the definition and change as little as possible. So I have moved from man-made driveways to and natural surface driveways to paved and unpaved driveways, with examples of what paved means. In my opinion, pavers, cobblestones, bricks count as paved because that's a situation where instability in the ground is going to mess with those a lot more than it would with gravel or dirt. I also wanted to change the definition of driveway to make sure that the paved unpaved distinction was referenced in both places.
I'm always a little bit hesitant about including two things that are the same in two different places, but I see why you did it. Only because, like, I guess these are close enough together that somebody would see them and know.
This is in the definitions section, so it's not going to be buried any place. If somebody's looking at setbacks and they see this is a structure setback and driveways are exempted from some setbacks, they would go, wait, are driveways not structures? Look at the definitions. Oh, regardless of which definition they look at, they're seeing the same thing.
Seeing the same thing, okay.
Okay, here's a question.
Mm-hmm.
Based on reading a semicolon as a comma is the way it came across. If pavers, both pervious and impervious, are structures, do we need to, since we already have one application at a location in town, do we need to also consider pervious or impervious asphalt?
I would
As a
consider
structure.
that asphalt or concrete.
Okay.
I think that all,
I'm not questioning how you defined it.
Mhm.
It's more, do we want to include that language
Well,
in there in terms of asphalt?
I
If it's,
I think one drawback of the definition as it stands is that we have a lot of examples. And I've restructured some. I added septic systems as an example to make sure there was no confusion. The beginning of Northwood's definition of structure is actually a very common one.
anything constructed.
I looked up some definitions, some sample definitions in the Planner's Dictionary from the American Planning Association, and the definition, anything constructed, the use of which requires permanent or temporary location on or in the ground or water, or attachment of something having permanent or temporary location on or in the ground of water, period, I think appeared, if not very closely, or if not verbatim, very close. It's the including but not limited to, that then I can understand the wish for illustrative examples, but the more examples there are, the more likely somebody is to say, but you haven't mentioned this, and therefore I'm going to challenge you on this thing that you failed to mention.
So
I committed the same sin with example concrete, asphalt, or pavers, but on the other hand, the more we add and impervious asphalt and other impervious pavement, and that we would miss something that somebody would be able to challenge and get through.
Well, I can tell you 90% of the ones that are questioned are driveways and septics. That people, the
Yeah.
state has a 10-foot and we have 20 on septic, and we consider that a structure.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes some getting used to.
Which is why I wanted to
communities.
include that as an explicit example.
Those two are the big ones.
okay,
Bob,
go ahead.
based on your semicolon discussion, could we just put a semicolon after pavers instead of a comma?
No, I think James' point is well taken, that asphalt is asphalt, whether it's pervious or not, and it's a structure.
Well,
So the comma separated list is concrete, comma, asphalt, comma, or pavers. But then I have an aside attached to pavers explaining the all-encompassing nature of the pavers, which is why I switched the comma series to semicolons and used the comma to make pavers, comma, paved or unpaved, or pervious or impervious as one block. So if I'm remembering my 8th grade grammar correctly, I feel good about that sentence structure.
well, I don't remember my 8th grade grammar, so if that's the correct hierarchy,
That is the correct hierarchy,
I'll go with it.
according to my
Just be
recollections
prepared
of grammar rules.
be prepared to quote that rule during public comment.
I would prefer not to have to quote grammar rules. I'd like to
Just
stick to
saying.
the ordinance.
You might have to explain that.
Because asphalt, you put asphalt down, it's gonna be one piece, but pavers can be spread out or,
They can have gaps in them. They can be like the hollow ones with the holes that they're flush, but they've got that pervious area. I thought, so the two things that I thought of to replace man-made versus natural surface that I think absolutely needs to be replaced were either pervious or impervious and paved or unpaved. And I didn't want to go the pervious or impervious route because different pavers have different rates of permeability.
Right.
crushed rock actually doesn't have a great degree of permeability. It's not as good as the bigger chunks of gravel, and I didn't want to be getting into infiltration rates on site plans. I don't know how those work very well.
Okay.
All right.
Essentially, the only change in driveway is that you cross-referenced the definition of structure.
Correct. Amendment 2, administrative provisions is where we keep some information about the powers of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. You'll recall we talked about the bill that was passed this year that allows us to set an expiration date on things that predated the state law that put expiration dates on variances and special exceptions. So the next two, Amendment 2 and Amendment 3, we thought first that it makes sense to explicitly reference that expiration period in Northwood zoning code in addition to the state law, so that people who aren't familiar with the RSAs will see it in the zoning code. And then second, so that's Amendment 2, is just taking that language from RSA 674-33 and plopping it in. And then the Amendment 3 is that scheduled termination piece, where we would be noticing that things, for example, the special exception that we discussed tonight about the excavation in the conservation overlay.
Perfect example.
That was approved in 2009. If it was approved in 2014, it would have had a 2-year expiration time on it, and it would have expired in 2016, and they would be going back to the ZBA to say, yes, we'd like to do this again. Because it was approved prior to that RSA being enacted in 2013, it's still on the books and will be until we can adopt this for scheduled termination. My comments on that carried over to the next page, but in those comments I tried to outline how that timeline would work in practice. So if this is approved at town meeting in 2019, the planning board would need to post notice, so I'm assuming it's going to take us a couple days to get that notice posted after town meeting and after the election. So assume beginning of April we post the notice in 2019. That notice needs to be posted for 1 year, so until April 2020, clearly stating the expiration, what's happening. People would have from 2 years of the expiration of that notice to use it or lose it. So any special exceptions or variances would in effect expire then at the beginning of April in 2022.
And they'd have the same appeal process if they wanted an extension?
If they wanted an extension, it could be extended by the ZBA for cause. I don't think that language was, or the other thing that the state language on the current expiration says is that special exception or variance can't expire within 6 months of the resolution of a planning application. So if somebody's variance is going to expire in November and they get planning board approval in October, they get 6 months from October to take advantage of it because they need to then get their building permit and actually act on it. I made sure that I carried that language over into the scheduled termination as well. So if somebody gets site plan approval in March of 2022, they're still going to have 6 months to get the ball rolling and start construction. So I think the biggest concern that voters might have is that we're taking away things that have had permissions granted. I just want to make clear with that timeline just how much time people are going to have to figure out what they've got, what they want to use, and put it into place.
Well, I think people also appreciate the times change, and something that maybe was thought to be okay 30 years ago maybe isn't in today's environment. So I think people understand that.
Any other questions about either 2 or 3? Okay. Amendment 4 is getting at the slopes overlay district, and this is one that I don't think I'm there yet. And I think some of that came from trying to work through the Minicelli application with Mr. Wickert, just trying to figure out if we're, the way it reads right now, if we tweak some of those fixes, it feels like we're going to be very restrictive comparatively on impacts to slopes, which isn't to say that we can't be. I just want to make it clear that the effect of what I've done right now is going to be pretty restrictive. So I tried as part of this to introduce a defined term, disturbance. The problem that I had with the way this is written right now is that we refer to construction. The problems that we're having are whether or not you can only not put structures in the slopes or whether or not you can impact the slopes. The definition of a structure that we still have is anything constructed. So if we say construction here, that's still limiting us to structures, and you would get a situation where a non-structural driveway could theoretically go through a steep slope. The flip side is by changing this to disturbance, you would not be able to regrade a slope of 25% or greater, the way I've got this written right now. And I think with item D that became C when I crossed something out under restrictions, it says prior to any disturbance of earth, suitable provisions for the prevention of erosion and for the control of runoff shall be made. If we're making provisions for the control of runoff, if you're disturbing 25% or greater, then you're allowed to disturb 25% or greater under some circumstances. And I'm not sure where to come out of this contradiction right now.
Okay.
The other option, if we are less concerned about people regrading slopes and more concerned about them putting things in it, is to undo what I've done with number 1 and try again to make all driveways structures. We tried that a couple years ago and the voters didn't like it.
Right.
Yep.
So.
James, isn't the biggest concern that we start grading away on some of these real steep slopes and cause even worse problems?
I mean, there's a variety of concerns. If you're putting things in it, whether it's a structure or a driveway or a road, your concern is going to be stability of the structure, driveway, road. A concern if you're regrading these, removing vegetation, is that you're going to have a lot of silt runoff. and that's going to get into water, and you're going to silt up streams and lakes and ponds. There are concerns with stability, that if you start grading into these slopes, that they're going to become unstable and you're going to get a landslide. Different communities handle each of those in different ways. For example, I think Dover only considers a slope overlay, the slope overlay district, to be things that measures that slope but have a greater area than 2,000 square feet. So the measurement of the slope is fine, but it is the same. But if you've got 100 square foot area of 25% slope, they don't care if you touch it, because that's something that's theoretically small enough, you're just going to pick it up with a backhoe and it's going to be gone. I think that if I were to do more changes with this, I'd have to look for some more examples, and that's going to take me more time as well.
I have to say, I kind of like what you said about Dover, because, I mean, in some cases, you know, you think about, well, the last case we had, I don't think it applies directly, but, you know, you hate to run into a situation where there's, like you said, you know, this much of a steep slope for a cubic yard of material or whatever, and then somebody can't get a driveway through.
Right, and that was
perfectly fine area.
Something that Mr. Wicker mentioned was that, all right, fine, regulate the slopes, but also include a minimum drop to count the slope. So if you're impacting steep slopes, but it's over like a 4-foot drop, that's not going to be as unstable as if it's steep slopes that continue over an 8-foot drop or a 10-foot drop.
Or a certain area. That's...
Right. So I think there are definitely other ways that we could approach this. I have that portion of Dover's ordinance printed out and sitting on my desk, and I helpfully forgot to bring it.
Well, it sounds like you have some good ideas, but yeah, I kind of agree with you. It seems kind of...
So if you're more comfortable with, let's look at a few models and possibly do a complete overhaul of this one, I can look for some of those as time allows.
Yeah.
I'd like to look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Some models. I especially appreciate the idea of not opening up a loophole by defining disturbance, or not defining disturbance, but using disturbance as opposed to construction. You know, a bit of essentially, we don't want you to disturb these, but we're defining it later.
Mm-hmm. And I think disturbance is a defined term. I think also got some heat several years ago when DES was implementing their shoreline regulations, that the more property rights oriented among us were sort of taking that to a position of extremes, that if you implement disturbance, then I can't go and clear the poison ivy that's on my hill out back, and my kid can't go and dig in the sand on the beach. And I don't think anybody would ever intentionally take something to that extreme, but disturbance isn't a perfect term either, because it's difficult to have a clear delineated cutoff point apart from
Exactly.
building inspector, don't be dumb. The next one is just sort of a general housekeeping item. There were several sections in the code that were referring to provisions applying to new lots or newly created lots. That's generally not how zoning codes work. Zoning codes apply to lots, even if it becomes most relevant when we're creating something for the first time. There's also potential, if you're reading all of this literally, that something could be created as a compliant lot and we've applied it when it's new, and then you can go and make a lot line adjustment because it already exists, and the code sections that say new lots don't apply to existing lots. I don't think I'd like being a lawyer trying to argue that in court, but still it feels a lot better just to remove those mentions of new. And then finally we get to agriculture, that initially we discussed changing. The more I've thought about this, the more I don't think we need to change anything. But I've still written it up as a policy memo, and if we send all of these code changes to town council, I would want this sent along with so that they can look it over and say, yes, that interpretation makes sense. The state has a definition of agriculture. Included in that definition of agriculture is a definition of agritourism. SB 412 in the last cycle prevents municipalities from adopting ordinances or policies that conflict with the definition of agritourism included in RSA 2134A. And I've pasted that definition for you. But the bill also affirms that you can establish the establishing of or expanding of a farm stand or a retail operation or an agritourism use can be made subject to appropriate land use controls like site plan review. So, if the bill is saying you can regulate agritourism and you can make it subject to special exceptions, you can make it subject to site plan criteria, you're allowed to treat agritourism differently from the rest of agriculture. We just can't define it differently. And currently we don't define it at all. So the way I would resolve that would be, we have an existing definition of forestry and agriculture that does not include agritourism under the state definition. So agritourism doesn't fall under our definition of forestry and agriculture. Instead, it would be an undefined term according to the ordinance, and our zoning code tells us exactly what to do with undefined terms. If somebody comes in with an unlisted use, it falls into column number 3, so it's subject to the first set of performance criteria and the second set. So if somebody came in and said, I have a farm, I would like to add a farm stand and delineate a parking area for people to put their cars if they came for cider tastings and weddings. We would say, great, file a site plan, show us all of that, and we will treat this as an unlisted use subject to both sets of performance criteria. I think that is the least amount of changing that we would need to do to reconcile everything. The concern that I would have with what we briefly talked about doing, which was adopting the definition of agriculture by default, is that currently agritourism, unless we were to break it out, is a subset of agriculture, and that by adopting that we would be putting ourselves in a position where we cannot treat agritourism differently from agriculture.
So go over again why you don't want to add the state's definition of agriculture? Explain that again.
Because I don't think we need to. I think the state's definition of agritourism is referenced pretty clearly. I think it's clear that it includes things that don't fit within our definition of agriculture.
Oh, so that's why.
So we would just say this is agritourism as defined by the state. Our zoning ordinance doesn't have a conflicting definition, it just doesn't define it. So if somebody submitted something like that to me in a letter of intent, I would say this is agritourism under the state definition. It's an undefined term in our zoning ordinance, and you need to comply with performance criteria A and performance criteria B.
Okay, so.
But it's otherwise permitted
So as long as we don't
in the general district.
conflict with their definition of agritourism, which we wouldn't if we don't include it, we're meeting the state statute for not conflict. Okay, yeah. I think that's worth a shot.
So the reason why I wanted a policy memo is just so I could write out this is how we would treat it, and if we're sending the language over to council for zoning amendments anyway, they can run a quick eye over this and say, yes, that makes sense and it's defensible.
Good. Okay. So other than that one that you said needs more work, and well, what's it, number 4 and number 5, which you say needs no work, other than writing it to clarify what you said. The other 3, are they ready to go?
So going back through these definitions, I think is ready to go. I think I've done what you asked. If there are specific language things that you have concerns about or additional changes, we can talk about them now. You can
Let's digest them. But
mull them over, and we can talk about them when we circle back to all of these and decide whether we're posting them to a public hearing or not. Section 2, that language is practically right out of the RSA.
yeah, so.
The only thing that I would note is that since both of 2 and 3 would go under administrative provisions, section 2F, I've numbered them 1 and 2 in the order that I see them happening. Personally, I think if one passes at town meeting and the other does not, renumbering them should be a technical amendment or a technical edit that shouldn't need to be approved by anybody. We're putting them in the same section,
Yeah, I'm with you, yeah.
and we just have to do what we need to do to make the numbering work. Section 2, or Amendment 3, I had to craft that language. And I tried to do it by sticking as close to the language from number 2 as possible and as close to the language from the bill as possible. But if everybody would want to look over the text of that bill and give it a once over, feel free, and we can make tweaks to that. Again, I think it's more or less good to go, so we can circle back to that when we're ready to refer it to a public hearing, if you want.
So Linda, based on your timeline and stuff, how long do we have to, if we do want to do something with number 4, before we're sort of up against our public notice deadlines and having everything ready for, I'm just trying to get some sense as to the overall timeline.
Well, it would be great to have all of this agreed upon by the end of November.
End of November.
I
Okay.
mean, we'd be really in a good place.
Because I think,
So we have at least one more work session.
oh yeah, November work session.
The problem with November work session is I think it's an early one. The way the days fall, I think Thursdays are as early as they possibly can be this November.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I can't put meaningful work into this until November, that's going to crunch me.
Okay.
Based on what we've got in front of us right now, the biggest thing that's likely to carry over is the excavation, and we tend not to get many new applications in November, December.
Maybe.
But it would be crunching a lot of stuff into that first week.
Okay.
If we're meeting the 8th, when are we meeting after that?
You want to segue into meeting vacations while we're, since that should be fairly quick.
I think let me run back through these
Sure.
really quickly. Amendment 5, I think, is good to go. I think that's just removing a handful of words. I think I'll need to think about the best way to explain that so that people aren't thinking that this is going to add new regulation on existing lots. If somebody's lot predated minimum lot size and it's too small, changing this is not going to affect them at all.
Yeah.
They're going to be covered by the nonconformity statutes, and they're still going to be fine. I think making that clear to people is going to be the tricky bit.
Yeah.
The policy memo, I think, is good to go if you don't have objections to it. So what I'm taking away, would we still like to do something with wetlands if possible? I think would be the last piece of direction.
I would.
If
It's
we,
come up.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can, but no, I guess
I think when
we don't risk
keep
losing
on
these other
adding
ones.
more and more and more, people
Yeah.
aren't informed enough as it is.
You can argue about it online.
In general, we have, I always take the time to go give a explanation and take questions at the deliberative session.
Right, but that's only 40 people.
I know,
Yeah.
but
And
there's
I
also
heard
the
from
voter.
everybody, there's a whole sheet of, the amendments, and no one knew anything about them.
Well, there's the voter guide as well.
I mean, the other thing is, if you're watching this on YouTube at some point in the future, and you have concerns about any of this language, any of these concepts, please come to a meeting and share that. We want this to be the best and most useful and most defensible code for Northwood. And if you think you have a great idea for how to solve the construction disturbance problem, or if you're concerned that disturbance is going to be a slippery slope to you can't dig in a sandbox anymore, please come in and
We're not taking away sandboxes.
let's see how we can come up with language that everybody feels comfortable supporting. Whether at the public hearings once we post these or before. My email address is planner@northwoodnh.org. Send it to me. Linda's is lsmith@northwood. Send it to her. We're happy to work with people on this. We're not trying to pull a fast one. We just think that there are really some contradictions in the code that need to get fixed.
On the other hand, if people don't quit flunking sandbox, we might take them away.
Don't throw sand at people.
The wetlands changes that we discussed were changes to the special exception criteria to make it make more sense for what the ZBA is supposed to be reviewing and under what circumstances you need one. Our intent with that, as I understood it, was not to change the intensity of regulation on wetlands or buffers or any of that. it was just to try and, again, clarify the process for getting those special exceptions.
A thought on that might be that if we feel pretty comfortable that we have a lot that we're dealing with now, if we get into that, we might want to consider having a joint session with Conservation and Zoning Board
I think that would be a great idea.
rather than trying to pull them in the beginning and see. And I think we have some folks on conservation now that are very knowledgeable and could have some good input.
So I think if we,
Since they're tied into it.
if we're comfortable with most of these changes, and I'm still working on the slopes overlay and the wetlands overlay, I think both of those would be good to share with everybody.
Well, then from a timing perspective, do we need to get that scheduled?
Yep, if we're gonna do it. Which,
A schedule of meetings?
Well,
Okay.
when James talks about, or you talk about sharing this with the Conservation Commission and the Zoning Board, how do we do that? Does somebody
Well,
go
I'm
as a rep?
thinking more that we put the wetlands on hold and do this over the winter. Oh, it's my thought. Is that on the
that's sort of what
wetlands
I've
part?
assumed.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
the two options are schedule a joint meeting for November,
We
or
could do that.
we put this on hold for next year.
The wetlands. Or you
Wetlands and or slopes, depending on what I'm able to pull together and what we want to share with them.
Well, I think it'd be hard to schedule a joint meeting not knowing that you're gonna get done, so maybe both of them have to be sort of worked through the coming year.
Well, this would be where we could talk about schedule.
That's why I have it out. Aside from tomorrow being Friday the 13th,
Ooh. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
No, it isn't.
Tomorrow's the 12th.
12.
That's the 12th.
Sorry,
yeah.
Yeah, this is birthday.
It's even worse.
Yeah.
It's Saturday.
okay,
Yeah.
never mind, no wonder why.
Somebody has his work calendar set on work week, not week.
No,
He's in the-
someone has been
He's on the
up too long.
Gregorian
in
calendar
the wrong
instead of the
year.
Julian calendar.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever,
We don't get it Friday the 13th, next September.
thank you. And we had 2 or 3 last year.
Yeah, there was a several.
So workshop is going to be the 8th in November. The regularly scheduled meeting would be Thanksgiving Day.
And if we have it then, I won't be here.
I won't be there either.
I feel like we might have a problem getting quorum.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the 15th or the 29th if we want to stick with Thursdays. We can push it forward or we can push it back.
You know, just thinking about the budget committee, I think their meeting's starting right after Thanksgiving, or do you have that on your calendar by any chance?
No, I don't.
The 1st, the 8th,
That's December, the 1st and 8th of December, they're meeting.
Oh, okay.
I know they're meeting like next Wednesday night.
The 29th, Friday,
It's a Thursday.
It is.
no, is it the 5th?
yes, it is.
It's the 5th one of the month.
So it wouldn't interfere with the school board probably.
Correct.
It would not.
I can't attend the 29th because it's actually a school board / selectmen meeting night. We're doing the SRO.
So they said, hey, we don't normally have a school board meeting.
Yes.
Let's add one.
Hey, come on, you get that.
That's right.
Oh.
And I have,
So Thursdays in November, if we move that meeting, we're conflicting with school board no matter what.
Yeah.
The selectmen are meeting here, or you're meeting up there?
I think all the selectmen are meeting there. Because we were invited to be on the panel. So the room is available that night. I just
The
can't.
15th.
The 29th.
Oh, sorry.
A personal note, Rachel's due date is December 3rd.
Oh.
So
Pushing it,
the
getting
chances
Yeah, but
of,
she'll go late, right?
the chances of her going early for the 29th are much higher than the chances of her going early for the 15th.
Yeah, but you know, James, the first one.
You're 2 weeks late.
Not just
I was
that,
2 weeks early.
not just that, but
Overachiever.
once she calls you, you still got another 6-8 hours.
Right.
Oh, you are.
I'll let you tell her that.
What?
Looking for a good lawyer after that one.
Ow.
What about?
Yeah, you don't have to worry.
Early?
Just
Yeah, go ahead.
come and wait for the call.
So the 15th?
Yes, the 15th.
I'd feel better about the 15th.
Okay.
And that gives me a fallback that if I don't have better language for the 8th,
Yeah.
it gives me just an extra week and I can still have it done pretty quickly.
Okay.
And then you can start panicking.
Yes.
And 14 days lead time is going to be enough time to get notice in the paper and all that.
It's gonna be tight.
If we get it in Friday.
There's no way we can
No.
do that.
No, I can see only is.
Because it won't show up in the paper until the 7th if I got it in on the 2nd. Almost.
And it needs to appear in the paper 10 days prior.
Mm-hmm.
So the 29th?
And you get me to that because it's not a regular scheduled.
Yeah, but you're gonna be up there probably. They're gonna
No,
want.
because it's not a regular scheduled meeting.
Oh, okay.
Well, if we're getting Gary,
We're getting Gary, that's what
then
matters.
that's what.
Worst comes to worst.
Bring
I'll
the
have-
wife.
I'll have done the staff reports long before, so worst comes to worst, I can talk with Jen about sending a sub if we absolutely need one.
So are you on the 29th?
We doing the 29th?
Sounds that way.
There's not much other choice. I mean, we could.
Not without picking a different night.
If we stick to Thursdays.
We could do the 21st, but a lot of people are getting ready for Thanksgiving.
Mm.
Yeah.
That makes it pretty difficult the night before.
December, we're fine now.
Well, yeah, we are.
We do want to discuss December. What? No, that's okay. That's a good segue. Multiple brains are thinking about calendars and we all have our
Well, yeah,
phones
and
out.
that week
Calendars
is, you know, a lot of people are on vacation that week.
out. I will be working that week.
I won't be here that week.
So for
Yeah, are
December,
people not able to
If we
attend
move
the
to the
22nd?
20th, which is the Thursday before,
That one didn't have any issues with noticing.
Let's take a look.
Which would be a school board night.
it would.
Mm.
It wouldn't be taped.
Well, yeah, because we wouldn't have the stuff.
You couldn't
till
give
the
Gary his
3rd.
Christmas gift.
Oh. Oh, yeah. So
No reaction.
No. Because the first is a Saturday. So the 20th, no.
20th, no? Can't do it?
Can't notice it. Because the deadline for applications will be the 3rd, because the first is a Saturday. So we couldn't.
you wouldn't be able to get it into the paper for Monday the 10th?
It won't publish
Published till the
till
12th.
as well.
Okay.
So what you're saying is really, we almost have to meet
We
at
don't really
least
have choices.
2 weeks. We
Right.
almost have to meet the fourth Thursday to meet.
We can't meet Thursday back to back.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Well,
No, we
if
can't.
the first
We can't, we can do that, we just can't do it, we can't do it.
a Friday, and everybody got everything in by 10 o'clock,
Be fine.
we probably, I could get the notice written up real quick and to the Sun by 4. But the problem is the first is a Saturday. And when the first falls on a weekend, we give everybody till that Monday.
Yeah,
Or when the first falls on a day off.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't get the notice in until this, I mean, it wouldn't, the deadline is the 7th for the next week. So, I mean, the forum is just really expensive. Or not the forum, the,
Union leader.
Foster's
Foster's.
or Seacoast Online.
No.
They charge you have to not only do it in print, you have to pay for the online listing.
It's a double.
Well,
Triple,
Not that many
more than
people.
triple.
Not that many people read it,
Wow.
they read the Sun. Well, what we've done in the past has been that when we get in a situation like this, if, depending on the number of or if we get any applications, we skip the work session, and you only have to have one meeting by RSA. So skip the work session, and we'd schedule the actual meeting for the 20th.
No.
The 13th.
No.
The problem is not the distance between the work session and the meeting. The problem is the distance between
The notice.
the application
Yeah.
deadline
Right,
and the
right.
meeting.
Right,
But Bob's saying that we have done this in the past.
yeah, we have.
But we
thought-
don't get any new applications
Last year,
in
if we didn't
December.
get new applications, we canceled the second one.
Right.
Yes.
And we met at the work session.
Right, but he was suggesting, I
Yes,
think, the
but if-
20th rather than the 13th.
Yeah, I was
Might be
suggesting to
better
skip
for
the.
you if you had a chance. or
Yeah.
something.
Now he's hoping she has the baby on time.
Or a
Because
couple
if she's
days
2 weeks
early.
late, you can't make that day either.
I'm planning to take 2 weeks
Oh, that's right, too.
afterwards, whenever it happens. So
Right.
Well, we haven't signed off on that request yet.
our contract says
Wow,
that
you talked about
SRPC is the
me.
one that signs off.
Oh, no, I thought the planning board had that right, no?
We like babies.
Yeah, bring the baby, no
Yeah, we
problem.
love children.
Have newborns when we're all sniffling.
So November, we've got the 8th
Your
and the
wife will
29th, right?
Okay.
And December, we're trying to figure out.
Yes.
So it sounds like you just want to see what happens in the beginning of
Just tell them we can't have a baby.
Well,
This is not the time to tell her that.
that.
can we put on the public notice
Dependent on
for November, saying
notices
no new
and-
applications in December?
No.
except-
deliveries. I don't think,
I
we
mean,
don't have to
other-
define what they are. just
Other
deliveries.
municipalities, instead of having a notice deadline that doesn't move, they move the notice deadline so they've got enough time, or the application deadline so they've got enough time for notice.
So just change it to like a week earlier in November?
Yeah, but we're still gonna get people that'll come in on the 1st, because they're not gonna call, they could
It
show
would,
up.
it would be a problem I think it would be a problem if we changed it for 1 month.
Yes.
If we changed it in the future for a standing policy,
It's going to be so confusing.
it would be, we'd have to publish a calendar.
You'd have
I
to
don't
publish
think Linda wants that headache.
Well, we did it, we changed it to the 1st.
For the 10th.
What-
Because it used to be like,
Instead of close of business. I can imagine.
and it took
And
like
I'm not
5
being
years to get everybody
But
on
still
board that typically comes in with applications to remember that it's always the first of the month.
Yes.
So now if we change that, whew,
I'm not saying it would be easy, but
oh, it would not be easy, James.
He's like,
And when people are
Well-
upset, I go, what was that? Planner at what?
here's his wife's phone number. I think she's in labor.
Yeah, let me actually on YouTube give you James's phone number.
please no.
Something to think about. If we got by with making the deadline, well, the first being on a weekend, if we made it the last, I know we're circling back, the last business day of the month of the deadline. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Last-
The last
there is
business-
an
the last business
immovable
Friday of the
deadline of the first of the month. And if the first of the month falls on a weekend,
It gets moved
you
back.
still have to meet the deadline, i.e. get it in on Friday.
Yes.
You don't get till
Yeah.
Monday.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, basically the same idea.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would, I think, be a reasonable.
Instead of
change.
saying, well, what it says now is the first, or if that falls on a weekend, it's
Yeah, the Monday.
forward, we just move it backward.
Back.
That would be the way to do it.
Deadline
But
for
it's
first.
only a problem because we're moving the meeting up. It's not normally ever a problem, but we figured that out.
Right, but
Right, but-
I think if we're regularly going to need to think about moving meetings at least twice a year,
Yeah, we are.
we will always have a meeting conflict with Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that works every
Always. As long
November.
as we-
Until
as
the
long as
end
we
of
consider
time.
meeting on- keep
Or at
meeting
least
on
the end
Until they
of
change
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
And make it convenient for the rest of us.
Yeah, I don't know why, we just ask if we can
Right.
have that changed.
Can we get that federal holiday on a Tuesday instead?
No, because the shopping is
Can
the
we
day
just have
after.
a Thanksgiving week?
No, no.
School kids get on time.
Okay.
Well, that discussion is for future consideration. I think we have to sort of sort out what we're gonna do now.
I mean, probably the best thing now is we can, if we know people are going to, because usually we have an idea.
We do, but every now and then, somebody will come in
I'm
and,
just saying. It's the
And that's a
only
rule-
thing I
that's
can
a
think
rule
of.
and
Just
procedure,
as
right?
soon as you figure you've got it figured out,
Yeah.
they unfigure it.
well, the other option we could do, let's say only one, like we get some beforehand.
Mhm.
And one comes in on the first. We could almost give say that we would hear that at the first work session in January. But we're gonna have the public hearings on the zoning. You know, we just don't know what we might get. We might get nothing, or we might get, that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Right.
We just don't know. And there's
So
some potential good-sized projects that could happen.
the other thing I'm thinking is just move the application deadline to the last business day of the month, period.
Before December.
For any,
Well, where are we at now?
across the board.
Why don't we could do an ad that says, do it as a public notice, as an ad, put it on the website, the forum, and put, for the month of December, applications for the planning board are due no later than November 29th.
Just for
At 10
December?
a.m.
And
Because like
that-
January 1st is a holiday, you guys are closed, so what happens on the 1st of January?
29th, is that the?
29th is a Thursday.
You just go over the
January,
second.
they'd be due the
It goes
second.
on the first business day.
Okay.
Then we go back to regular policy,
So
because we don't have any rescheduled
They
meetings.
did get weird about the
It's just
29th.
November and December that always.
Right,
Happens again in
the
June.
29th,
It's on a Saturday again.
then you could
We don't
do
typically
that on
reschedule
Friday
meetings.
morning.
So that's the problem.
What if we do
It's just
that?
November
Where
and
the
December.
first is where the holidays and
Right.
Then we could have the meeting on the 20th.
If you just have it, that's always the way.
I'm fine with that.
If it's gonna happen every,
I'm fine with
You
So,
probably not coming
decision.
anyway, right?
No, that's,
for
No
item.
matter what. You're gonna do reviews maybe, or?
I'm
next
hoping that
year
we
we'll
won't
be
have
meeting on
cases come in,
Thanksgiving.
So we
Right.
don't have to figure out reviews.
Yes.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Worst case, Jen writes a staff report and you get a very different staff report.
maybe
Right.
sleep, you know.
Yeah, they sleep for a
Yeah.
long time.
Sleep, poop. That's about it.
Yeah.
we
Eat.
decide
Okay.
what the meetings in
It's
December are
9:30.
going to be.
Can we decide what we're doing
December.
for the December meeting? So we're gonna change the notice to just for December,
I would,
29th?
I kind of like the idea of changing it permanently to the last,
Well,
Oh, yeah, we
We can do that.
we do that.
Let's try this for now.
Yeah, try this for, just for now.
okay, so when are we meeting in December?
13th and the 20th.
27th?
No,
So the 27th is being moved to the 20th.
13th and 27th?
Because I think several people have said they can't make it.
On the 27th?
Correct.
I can't, I don't know if I
The 13th and
can.
the 20th then,
Did you
or?
say you couldn't,
I
Beth?
can't. 20th.
And Bob, I can't.
No, I will, I'll be here,
The
13th?
27th?
27th.
Oh, I thought you said you couldn't be
No.
here. Well, do we want to do the 27th then?
I would rather not do the 27th. I think the 27th is risky for quorum.
Well, so what's the matter with the 20th?
See how important I am?
Unless 4 of you can say that you're going to be here.
Well, we have a granddaughter due, so I might not be here. I'm kind of like you.
Yeah.
First
And that's
one-
not something you
first
can
one for the
schedule.
mother or no?
First, yes, my son's,
That's
yeah,
true.
his birthday.
So,
you don't
We're going to have a
We got
lot
plenty of
better
time.
chance,
Make
if
it 20
anything, of
instead
having
of-
James here on the 27th.
Yes.
I'm not traveling for Christmas this year.
Smart man.
So the 20th?
I don't think
I
we've
don't think
decided.
we're sure yet.
What's the board want to do? Who can make the 20th?
I can,
I could do the 20th.
We all can do the 20th.
Yeah, we'll be-
Possibility of James not being here
because, oh, you're on leave?
because he's on family leave.
Right, because she's going to be 2 weeks late.
He's on family work.
I was That's only the 17th.
4 days late, don't
The
worry.
He'll be
20th.
just starting his leave
I was
then.
right.
I'm hoping for 4 days
That's
late
just
because
underwear.
that's my birthday.
So,
And
The
her
7th?
birthday.
Oh, her birthday?
Yeah, but she's really
Okay.
late. Then
so
27th.
most of the time, the 20th, the
I
27th.
hope she never sees this tape.
That's your baby gift, is the whole discussion about her.
27th. Who can make the 27th?
Is it gonna snow?
I don't know.
Oh, I don't drive in
Let
the
me check
snow.
the weather channel.
That's why I work at a school.
Okay, so 2 of us can make the 27th.
I can make it.
Yes, no.
3,
Sorry. Yes.
yeah.
Okay, but that gives us 3. That does not give us quorum. We still have Justin. We have Joe.
We don't know what they're
We
doing.
don't know what they're doing. 'Cause
They're not here.
But that's a chance of 1. Needing 1 more.
And we don't have any alternates.
Nope, not yet.
I'm working on it.
So am I. I'm
What kind of
partial, more
CBA?
partial to go with
We
the
don't have
20th.
a full board. We don't even have a full board. And no
do they
one.
have
14th and the
thoughts?
20th?
I can do the
That's what I'm
20th.
thinking.
Five-person
is
board, we
have
only
one
have
meeting in
4 and
December
no
at the 20th.
alternates. For a while.
If we meet on the 20th, well, most likely you're not going to be here anyway for final review. Well, no, sorry, getting the month.
We'll figure out on SRPC's end how to do staff reports. After 2 weeks, I'm going to start working myself gradually back into things. So if it's week number 3, Northwood might be all I do that week, and that's fine by me.
Oh, you do care.
At least a little.
Wow.
So what, are we talking about having one meeting in December on the 20th?
That was my intention, is to have one meeting in December on the 20th.
One meeting on the 20th?
If there's no.
If there are applications or stuff that we need to deal with. No, we have to meet once a month, period. So we'd have one meeting on the 20th to cover the entire month of December. So we'd have applications, we'd have any final language for zoning amendments. I'd have the planning board report due for the town for the end of the year thing. And whatever else comes into play.
So zoning, we would have final discussions at the only meeting in December to refer to a public hearing
We'd have
in January
most likely,
to get on the schedule.
I would say I'd want these done by in November.
Yeah.
That have the language done for the majority of them, maybe possibly not the wetlands, but have.
Well, I can do the ballot language for the rest of them anytime.
Okay, that'd be fine. Because I would not want to.
We could send
we
those
s-
to council early,
Oh,
so they've got plenty of
definitely.
time to turn them
I'd
around.
rather get them there,
Yeah.
because they
And
get
if we have
bombarded
to
all at
rush
one time, yeah.
2 of them at the last minute, that's better than rushing 6 or 7.
Is the plan that you're gonna vote on these as they're finished for the November work session?
Yes,
Send them to council,
send as many as we can get
as
through
we have.
done.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, so then the 20th would be adequate to give notice for review for these, to still get the ballot language done for anything that's left.
And we'll get a schedule for the public
We get
hearings.
scheduled for public hearings.
Because we gotta back up the dates for the
Exactly.
newspaper ads and everything else because of the holiday deadline, so.
Yeah.
If we can get pretty close by the end of November, then it shouldn't be.
So let's, just as a suggestion, let's put in the agenda and maybe send out an email to say, okay, here are confirmed dates, these are what must be done.
Okay,
Even if it's just to me,
we'll set up a calendar.
that's fine.
So do you think on the agenda we could have the new dates listed at the bottom? Just for like
Yes.
if Joe's not here,
Yes.
or, okay.
So go over the dates again, just so I got them. The
So we have
8th,
a meeting November 9th,
9th or 8th?
No, no, not the 9th, the 8th.
8th. I didn't scroll up fast enough.
You're messing with my head,
November
Bob?
8th, I'm not trying to, November 8th
It
Yes.
doesn't take that much.
and
Yeah.
November 29th,
Yeah.
and then December 20th.
Unless we hear otherwise.
No, I think he's just saying
I think
December
we
20th.
have, we have to meet at least once in
The
December.
13th
I know, but the 13th is.
will be canceled. We're saying that right now.
So, because I don't think we can meet notice to begin with.
Okay.
Oh, we can have a work session.
We got a
on the
work session.
13th. Why don't we tentatively plan on that? I just crossed it out.
Yeah, I did too.
And then if no
I'm running out of
applications
space here on
my
come
page
in, then
here.
we
Yeah.
wouldn't need it, we can cancel it. We don't need to notice that, that's a regularly
Okay.
scheduled work session night. Oh, is
That's
that-
like 24 or 48 hours
Right.
public notice on the
All we
website.
need to do is
Okay.
just send out a bulletin and put something on here, we're not having that meeting.
Okay,
Terrific.
Mm.
So we're back to the 13th and the 20th.
13th and the 20th.
13th
Alright.
if needed,
Yep.
and the 20th. And then possibly, if we
theoretically,
do
we-
need it, we could do the finish up the zoning, if there's anything loose hanging on the 13th.
Yeah.
And if we don't, correct me if I'm wrong, if we don't have any applications for December, we,
20th only,
Yes.
not the 13th.
correct.
Oh, I asked. Okay. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'll find out when I see the notes on the agenda.
I'll actually do a calendar
I don't even.
for November and December. I can email them to you and print them out.
Okay, that'd be good. I want to know, as long as,
Well, if we're only having one meeting in December, why would we just
no,
stick
we're
to?
having two.
Oh, okay.
Theoretically, we're
Now,
scheduling two.
when
we
you
might
change
have
it to school board nights, I have problems with those because I have to attend school board meetings. I'm the union president. So
Okay,
just let you know that.
Oh, yeah, the 20th is going
Right,
to be your
the school board night, so
okay,
We
good to
got,
know.
I'd like,
we got 4 other people
it's like, you know,
plus.
Those are
the job I get paid for.
What time do your meetings start?
6:30.
Same time.
Why don't you convince them that they have a December meeting?
You don't listen to me.
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe I'll have to talk with Pete.
Well, the other,
Um,
what is it called?
Changing things. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, did I say that?
You just say that out loud. Okay.
Well, I put my calendar away.
I
I'm
mean,
not.
you don't,
Yeah.
you don't,
Yeah.
you don't
I think
have
we're
to
good.
have me. You can make sure that
Yeah.
other people come.
There's 4 of us.
Right.
That'll work. CIP is the last thing on the agenda.
Yeah, but we've already closed our folders.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know. Well, you didn't see, I brought my stuff. I did not. Decisions that need to be made. Ms. Select Person should be paying attention. Highway, police, and recreation, and transfer station did not submit any capital improvement projects. They had,
Recreation did it?
recreation did not.
They,
had the splash pad at all.
yeah, that was pretend. They said they did.
Well, okay, I did not get any
The
paperwork.
commission redid it all.
I did not get any
Did
paperwork.
you get it? Sharon was gonna send it to you, Linda.
I don't believe I got it. What's it for? Do
I
you
don't know, I'm not on the committee anymore, DJ's on that now. I know that the commission, they worked on it. After I said, remember, the splash pad was a joke.
Yeah,
It was
I
like,
remember discussing that.
right.
But I don't have
Like, they were
any
like, oh, anything, we want a splash pad. It wasn't like,
serious.
right.
I did not recall seeing an email. I sent an email.
must have been like
and
at least a month or two
Sharon
ago.
said that they were going to go, she asked me if they still had time, and I said yes.
Yep.
But I don't think I ever received anything.
Could we find
I'll
out?
check on that tomorrow, I'll be here.
Well, Sharon will be, she's off on Friday, but if you want to check on Monday with her?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, just send it to me if you have,
That's
if you have
correct.
stuff.
PD didn't,
Police department, I did not get anything, but they have the only thing they had from the 2017 plan was the safety complex and then monies for an annual cruiser.
Right.
I left the annual cruiser in there, 32 grand yearly, because it's
right.
They have.
And maybe the highway department, because Charlie was retiring, but
Right.
now Pete's in charge. Maybe we should send an email to
maybe I'll
Pete.
talk to Pete.
Is Pete, was he given authority to be in charge?
He was given the job. Who else does highway? Is there a commission for that?
There's highway advisory. And there's the other
The reason,
I don't know.
I can
I'm just-
discuss it later, but
It's all right. I don't know.
we didn't know whether or not you don't have a road agent, correct?
Correct.
Oh, that's what.
But
He was hired on Tuesday.
he changed his position, but
Right, so now he's labor.
that doesn't make him the
Oh, I don't-
department head, I don't think. But I don't
Even-
know.
even-
I don't know.
department. It sounds like he's in the department.
He's the.
Was Charlie the department head?
Yes, as road agent,
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah,
did the
Charlie
road plan
was.
though come from Charlie or did it come from the highway advisory board?
The road plan,
Yeah.
the road maintenance
Well,
plan?
your
Yeah.
CIP stuff that you would need, who would we reach out to?
That would be, sounds like it's BP. I mean, it's trucks, it's a grader, or, big things like that, if they have anything.
Oh,
not-
so for
not
those
amazing,
things, yeah.
Not the
Like-
road plan.
I think,
Yeah, okay, you have the road plan?
don't they have a truck on the agenda for next year or something?
I don't know.
I think.
I thought they did.
They might.
Well,
That's
and
We
if,
need
I
to
mean,
find out,
Yeah, I heard something about that, yeah, that there was a lot of trucks.
because we think last year we got the backhoe, and
Right.
this year the plan was the truck. But it's a matter of, I can easily pull the numbers for it, if we just need to know if they actually want to do it. But if someone could find out,
I
even if
can
it's a
find out
matter
that
of,
as
they
well.
can just call me, you know,
Okay.
I'm okay explaining, you know, what I need, and if
I don't know who would know.
I don't.
We're in such a state of transition.
Right, I mean, I thought maybe Charlie didn't
if
submit
Charlie
it because he
mentioned
wasn't
it-
going to be here, but maybe.
Yeah,
mentioned it to
Well-
the former town administrator, that probably never got,
yeah.
I mean, I never received anything, so
I mean, the CIP
they're
is,
both.
there's,
I was going to
They're
come in
both
tomorrow
wrong.
after school and just touch base and, you know, just see Tammy, just to see how she's doing. I can ask. I mean, if you don't want to, I don't mind.
I don't mind, I'm gonna be here
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll see Pete at the end of this month, at the Highway Advisory meeting, if I attend,
Okay.
which I usually do, or try to. But it'd be nicer to have the plan in place before then. Can you send me his email and I'll just email him? Does he email? Pete? Does Pete email?
Uh,
Maybe?
I don't wanna talk about it.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
We'll talk about it after.
Yeah, we'll talk about it afterward. If the board's okay, I'll take care of getting that last bits of information from them.
Highway and transfer station.
Yes, if they have anything, well, and we need to search for recreation.
But Linda was going to do that
Linda's
with
gonna
Sharon
do
on
that.
Monday,
Yeah,
correct?
I'll check with
Okay.
both of them tomorrow morning.
Um,
You want?
Well, Sharon on Monday.
Yeah, and then if that's the
Right,
case,
right,
I'll,
right.
Okay.
I'll
All right.
talk to I'll find as much information as I can. Because
How
there
about
is
the
no,
police department? How do you?
I'll talk to Glenn.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think he has anything significant aside from the safety complex and the cruiser on the annual bid. That's about all he
Yeah, I
knows.
don't think so.
Yeah. And that's easy enough
Okay.
to do, if they want to resubmit it. Because there is no formal role for the CIP. It's a guiding document, and it's still new. I'm okay if we're incomplete because of transition of staff this year. It's still nice to have it. Because I want to make sure the process continues.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's
Do
all
you
I
think
have.
it's feasible that the budget committee would have it for the first meeting in December, or?
I would think so. I mean, it's just about done.
And just a question, if things move forward and the safety complex is put on there as a bond issue, for example, would that be added to it,
I can easily add it. Yep.
even though it's like current year?
Well,
Yes.
you had that
I
on
had
the
the safety
CIP
complex
somewhere.
on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. It's
For
just
last year's.
Oh,
but
okay.
the dollar figure is probably different. I mean,
The dollar figures are different, the time frame's different. You know, I don't know where things stand with it, but it's, you know, that's 10 minutes
Yeah. Okay.
if that. So, because it's not like this is a multiple thousand page
Right.
sheet. It's not like the school town budget.
Then I know you worked in the library and they did some stuff already to
Yes,
cross
I
off
took
the
that
CIP.
That's
Okay.
already crossed off.
All right.
They have the furnace replacement, the front door replacement, which I have to add back in, and the solar panel for various years.
Good.
I think we're down to, moved from like $5 million in requisitions from last year to under 2 at this point, just because a lot of that stuff was not submitted. But that's okay. Anyway,
Did Kate submit something for the town?
no.
No.
And that, I mean, there were things like the truck, or a pickup truck, the server, a couple things like that I've left in because I know the repeating costs.
Okay. Well, I know they were talking about the roof next door,
Okay,
so that's why I asked. Okay.
okay. Maybe I'll talk with, can we find out?
Tammy's on
Yeah.
Monday,
See if
Fridays.
we find anything from Tammy as far as big projects go? I think, or is
Well,
that too
I don't
soon?
think it's fair to ask her
Yeah, I didn't think so.
on
I
day
don't
2.
think she's-
Okay,
would have any idea.
Yeah.
She's just coming in.
Right.
sure. Sort of what I thought, but I
Yeah.
always wanted
No,
to
I-
propose it. Okay, anything else?
Would you
I think it'd
entertain a
be
motion to
difficult.
adjourn?
Yes.
So moved.
Good night. We're adjourned at 9:50.